a challenge or a problem with what they're trying to do with CRISPR and gene editing and trying to develop like solutions for our problems right now, would we be trying breaking other things while we're trying to fix others? Is that an issue? Is that a concern? What can be done about it?
Excellent question. In Evolution's Achilles Heels, the book and the DVD, we talked about polyfunctional DNA, that any specific letter might do more than one thing. Like most letters in the genome have more than one function. So if you change one letter, you might be changing two completely different genes or two completely different features, and makes it really treacherous and difficult. So CRISPR technology, the ability to go in and actually edit the genome of an organism, which we can now do, is having difficulties because of this polyfunctionality problem. For instance, the scientists who created genetically modified baby girls in China, the announcement was a couple of months ago, and the whole world had a firestorm. The guy did immoral things, but he edited these baby girls' DNA, and they are now supposedly HIV resistant. But it also affects intelligence. And it also affects something else. People who carry the mutation that this guy gave to these girls have a whole suite of other things going on. Some of them are good and some of them are bad. So yes, your question is exactly appropriate. You can't just willy-nilly change a letter. There's downstream effects that are sometimes hard to predict because the human genome is complex. And since it's so complex, it actually argues against evolution. But with very good forethought and a lot of really careful experimentation, we might be able to very carefully edit specific genes in the human body. But it's difficult.
Yeah, may I expand on that? Could you mention that?
Is it a question?
Yeah. You're saying that, I remember you saying last night, he said they were worried about him killing the girls.
Yeah.
How is that possible? He's taking something away from him that could kill him, or is he injecting them?
Actually, he broke a gene.
He broke a gene.
Yeah.
So how could that possibly kill him?
Most genes, if you lose a gene, is lethal. There are some genes that, what?
Don't they have more genes in them? It's not just one gene.
Oh yeah, but if you take away a gene that has a critical function, you can't survive. This particular one, since we already knew that some people are in the world have this mutation and it confers HIV resistance, he said, oh, I can just do that to them. So there are some mutations that are survivable. And we see when we look at people and the way we look, most of us are carrying mutations that affect the way we look. The ones that are survivable, we see. The ones that aren't survivable, they get eliminated instantly. And so this one particular one, since other people had it, he said, oh, I can do it too. But the changes he made weren't perfect. He actually changed them differently than to the natural state that some people carry.
Do you want us to use this mic?
Oh, yeah, I guess you should have, but I answered it anyway. All right, sorry people who might be listening, I forgot to repeat the question directly. I'll do it next time. Are we using a mic or am I just going to repeat the question? All right, got to come up here and there we go. We got another question?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, don't even start me on that. That's ridiculous.
Yes, totally. All right.
So, you were saying that the Y chromosome is passed on from men to men, right?
Yes, only.
Okay. So, my great-great-grandfather,
Okay.
and I don't know the names, died of a pretty good age and died with white hair. Now, my great-grandfather, white hair. My grandfather, white hair. My father died, white hair. I'm getting white.
Okay.
My son is bald. He wants to know why.
Oh. It's your wife's fault.
Yeah, but I know because I've heard somewhere that it is passed on from the woman's side.
Yeah.
But you just said that Y is passed on from man to man to man.
Oh, no.
So I'm missing something. Okay.
Hemophilia, color blindness, balding, those are genes that are carried on the X chromosome. Oh. Men only have one X chromosome.
Okay.
So if you carry that gene on your only X chromosome, you've only got one copy of it. Your body has nothing else to compare to. It has to do whatever that gene's telling it. Okay. Females have two X chromosomes, And so therefore, if they're carrying like a color blindness gene and one X chromosome, the other one probably doesn't have that color blindness gene. And so they won't be colorblind even though they're carrying it. This is why Queen Victoria did not have hemophilia. But she was a carrier of hemophilia, and she had like 10 kids, and they spread the hemophilia gene across all the royal houses of Europe. It led to the Russian Revolution in 1917, because her granddaughter was a carrier, and Tsar Nicholas's son, therefore, had hemophilia. Okay.
Okay. I have another question, but I can't remember it right now. Come back.
All right. Sir.
I was just wondering why people have the tailbone.
Oh, why do people have a tailbone?
Yeah.
Great question. The answer is they do not have a tailbone. People never have a tailbone. There is no stage of development where a person ever has a tailbone. You have the same number of vertebrae now that you had when you were growing in your mama's tummy. However, because the spinal cord is so important, in fact, our body is organized around our spinal cord.
Yeah.
The first thing to develop is your spinal cord and your vertebra. And your legs develop later because you don't need legs when you're in your mother's tummy.
Okay.
And so at one point in time, you have this long spinal cord and these little teeny legs, and the spinal cord sticks out beyond the legs. It looks like a tail. But then as your legs grow proportionally, that thing is still right here. It's called the coccyx. It's not a tailbone. In fact, it's very important. These little bones right here, your walking muscles connect to them. If you remove your coccyx, you have a really hard time walking. So it's functional, it's important, it's not like we ever had a tail. Some children are born with protuberances back here, deformities and things like that. They're not tails, they're accidents.
Okay.
Spina bifida is a classic thing. Oh, my kid has a tail. No, you've got a sac of spinal fluid and nervous tissue that's bulging out from the bottom end of your spinal cord. It's a really, really bad mutation. Most people would die if they didn't get it corrected. It's not a tail.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Didn't mean to shoot you down. But
I was just like curious. Yeah.
It's the old idea that the human embryo goes through all the stages of evolution as it's developing. It's not true. In fact, the man who started that, Ernst Haeckel in the 1800s, he was lying. And everyone within 10 years, other anatomists went and looked at his data and said, no, this is not true. So within 10 years of his publications, people showed him that he was a fraud, and yet that stayed in our textbooks for another 150 years anyway.
You said something really quick before, I might have missed it. If you remove this, you could die? Is that what you said?
If you remove the coccyx,
No, that extra stuff that you said. From spinal bifida. Just making it going big.
oh yeah, spinal bifida, if you have a bulging sac of spinal fluid and maybe nervous tissue sticking out of your lower back, you're going to be in pain, and you get a high risk of having that thing break or something, get infections, and it's right into your nervous system then. I mean, it's a really problematic thing that needs to be corrected. I don't know how they fix it. I do, but I think they... Anyone know more about spina bifida than I do? They just cut it off?
I don't know how, but
Yeah, they do something. I'm not exactly certain, but it's dangerous. Ma'am.
okay. I have a question, but I'm not sure. I was on my way out and I'm hard of hearing, but you said no doctrinal questions. I just wanted clarification for something that you said that
If
I
you
didn't
ask me a
understand.
doctrinal question, I'm going to say, hey, pastor, sermon
Okay.
tomorrow. Okay.
All right. So you said that all men, that they say all men go back to Noah and that Adam's chromosome was lost.
Yes.
And my question was, didn't Noah have Adam's chromosome?
yes.
And then
Yes.
Then there's another part 2 to that.
Okay.
And then you said that, like, I'm related to Jesus through Adam. Am I not related to Jesus through Noah?
Yes,
But
that is
the
also true.
evolutionists are wrong.
But
to give
scripturally, we
Adam
talk about the
Y
first Adam and the second,
Okay,
the
so
last Adam, not
okay.
the first Noah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Going back to the first question, though. Noah did not necessarily have Adam's Y chromosome, because in those 10 generations, a family tree would have started to develop. Mutations might have been happening. He might have had a slightly mutated version of Adam's Y chromosome. And so then when we went through the flood bottleneck, all that other stuff was lost. We only can go back to Noah. When we go back to Noah, it's going to be close to Adam, but it might not be exactly the same. So we have lost Adam's Y chromosome, and we'll never be able to figure out what it was. All right, did I answer both questions? All right, cool. Uh-huh.
Gene diversity, you alluded to it, is that good? Like, is gene diversity good, is what I'm trying to figure out?
Yeah.
You said something about it earlier today,
Genetic diversity, is it good? The answer is, yeah, it's very good.
as opposed to everything being the same. That's not.
Yeah, if all people had everything exactly the same, then one virus could theoretically wipe out 100% of all people. Genetic diversity is a good thing. Most genetic diversity, though, is shared amongst all populations on Earth. Meaning that genetic diversity was at Babel, it was on the ark, and therefore was in Adam and Eve. Most of the variants that we see in this room right here were designed by God. So he put into his creation genetic diversity. We do see low diversity populations like the Amish, Native Americans, some people on some remote Pacific island, and it's problematic. You don't want to lose all your diversity. You can't, the reason why, the mumps or rubella or even the plague didn't kill everyone in Europe was because there's diversity. Okay.
Recently, I was asked a question about the origin of giants, and it's a controversial.
What about the origin of giants?
Based on chapter 6 on the.
Yeah, Genesis chapter 6.
Can you say
The sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they went in into them, blah, 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 blah. And the giants, the Nephilim, the giants, depends on which Bible translation you're going to use. King James says giants. Modern Bible translations say, they say Nephilim? The Hebrew is Nephilim. It means fallen ones. It doesn't mean giant. Interestingly, the King James transliterated that word from the Latin, gigantes. The Latin gigantes hints back at Greek mythology. The Titans, the half-god, half-humans. The word doesn't mean giant. But the King James translators translated it giant because the Latin said gigantes. There has been several thousand years of speculation and arguments about this. Theologians have been yelling at each other for a long time. The idea that that the sons of man are descendants of Seth, Adam's son Seth. The sons of God are the godly line of Seth. Really started with Martin Luther. Prior to Luther, pretty much all scholarship said, no, those are angels. But there's no marriage or giving in marriage in heaven, so how can it be angels? And so the theologians argue. If you would like a good summary of this and all the classic viewpoints, go to creation.com, type in Nephilim, and you'll get an appendix of the book Alien Intrusion, which is out on our tables. You can pick up the book if you like also. Who were the sons of God in Genesis 6? It'll go through all the classic viewpoints. It'll show pros and cons of each one. It's a really good summary of the debate. My personal opinion, since you probably, I will tell you, I've been dragged kicking and screaming to the position that that is an angelic thing. All the Jewish scholarship before the Reformation said so. Jude and Peter both referenced the angels that disobeyed in the time of Noah, and now they're locked up in everlasting chains. That's a reference to the book of Enoch. And Enoch is definitely talking about angels and humans, etc. It's a really messy subject, and it gets really ugly real fast, and I probably actually made someone angry, even what I've said so far. So, you're welcome. We have much more to learn. One more question? All right. Last question of the morning.
You were saying we get bad genetics when the families intermarry.
Yes.
And I was wondering, we have a Hasidic community up here, and they do a lot of interracially, and we find that they have a lot of autistic children and handicapped children. Could that be the reason for this?
Yes, the Hasidic community has had historically issues with people marrying people close related to them. They have now started a massive program of genetic counseling and family line analysis, and they're trying to find people genetically that are compatible, not only religiously compatible. They are proceeding through this with intelligence and deliberateness, because they understand that if it's just high rate, I mean, Tay-Sachs and all sorts of other things that are very common in that community, they're trying to avoid it. All right?
I have a question.
You got a question? You can come over here.
Genes, well, speak from here.
All right.
Genes basically is instructions. Is it not?
What is instructions?
What's the definition of a gene?
Oh, what's the definition of a gene? We don't have a definition of a gene anymore. Modern genetics has blown it out of the water, because we know when you look at the human genome, you say, okay, a protein starts here and ends here in the genome. Yeah, now we know that this piece in the middle can be used in this other protein or this other protein or that other protein, depending on the context. And the cell splices and dices a gene and reuses all the pieces in different places, which is why we have 22,000 genes and we can produce over 300,000 unique proteins.
Well, isn't a gene basically instructions for the cell what to do?
The original idea, and it's still pretty much true in bacteria, that a gene is a specific instruction of something to do. It's something that manufactures a protein. And the proteins are the machines in the cell that do all the work.
Right, so you go back a little bit further from a gene, basically it's intent, purpose, and meaning.
Intent, purpose, and meaning is written into the genome, yes.
Where does that come from?
That's
Philosophical question.
That's a philosophical question. We're dealing with the origin of life, and that is the biggest problem for Darwinian evolution. It is a giant Achilles heels for them, which is why an entire chapter of evolution's Achilles heels is called the origin of life. And we definitely talk about these very things. In fact, John Sanford, a good friend of mine, who's professor up in Cornell, was anyway, he said in there, you can have all the DNA you want. You can have all the proteins you want. You can have membranes. You can have cells. You can have early life doing everything you want. You can have perfectly formed cells, and you'll never have life. Because even if you have a string of DNA, it's just random letters. There's no computer program.
Right, but the instructions, the meaning, the intent, and the purpose basically comes from God.
Yes.
That's the bottom line.
Yep. Structure, meaning, purpose, and intent. Apologetics is called. Has to come from an intelligent source, and therefore, so we're talking about the origin of life, it has to come from God.
Right, that goes into the gene, and the gene goes into the cell, building the cell, and the proteins, and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, with information theory, there's a whole section on creation.com on information theory. This is what you're talking about. Yeah, it's very philosophical, but it's also computer science. It's intersection of computer science and philosophy.
Right,
And that's where the origin of life is.
then you can get back to coding and whatnot.
And you can get right back to coding. You can make all of these comparisons between technology in the cell, computers in the cell, information in the cell, language in the cell, and all of those things come from intelligence only, not through random chemistry in a test tube.
Yeah, tell that to an atheist.
Yeah, tell it to an atheist. They won't accept it, but some of them say, oh, well, I know that, but aliens.
Oh, no.
Oh, there's a lot of young professors who think aliens created life. But then the question is, okay, who created the aliens? Yeah, and then now you're in an infinite loop. Even in the Big Bang, you've only got 13, 14 billion years. You can't have that many generations before you hit now you don't have any more aliens, because now you just got quarks floating around in the universe. Where do these aliens come from? So,
Well, I get all my answers from Star Trek. They all speak English. Ain't that great?
all right. We are done with the Q&A. I'll be here answering questions. Does anyone want to close?